What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening to the market this far as we have Jerome Powell giving a speech for tomorrow, what's happening with some more earnings, and what data is coming out as well later on during the day that could affect the markets. But before I bring in the devil's information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon. Anyways, when it comes to the market thus far, I just want to mention that SPY had this very, very nice sell-off that started yesterday at the very end of the day. We saw this thing sinking during the after hours, and this continued into today as we were basically predicting. But then the SPY dropped, we actually came down to about 505, and once we hit 505, we saw some buyers defend it, but overall SPY is starting a slight little downtrend like this. But the question is, will it continue to sell off very hard, or are we about to see an intraday bounce tomorrow? Well, this is going to depend a lot on the data coming out as well. So for the data, it's going to be coming out for Wednesday, March 6th, 2024. The first thing to be watching for is at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Jerome Powell giving a speech. He's going to be giving a testimony actually in front of the House. And what he says could be very, very important. When Powell starts opening his mouth, this may cause some insane volatility in the markets. Sometimes it's very hard to predict, so you want to be very, very careful. At the same time, at 10 a.m., we have the JOLTS job openings and the JOLTS job quits coming out. So we'll have to see how that ends up affecting the markets too. I think Jerome Powell may even address these numbers in real time. On top of this, I just want to mention that as the day progresses, we have Daly from the Fed giving a speech around noon. Then at 2 p.m., we have the Fed beige book coming out, not to mention Kashkari giving a speech at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So all the data is very minor. The main two times to be watching for volatility are 10 a.m. when we have Jerome Powell's speech and some jobs numbers, and then also at about 2 o'clock p.m., we have the Fed beige book coming out. Those are the only main times we watch for major volatility. Everything else around that is quite minor, in my opinion. So what's happening with Jerome Powell? He's going to be testifying once again in front of the House. Investors are going to be watching it very, very carefully, listening to what Jerome Powell has to say. And what this guy says is going to shake the entire markets like crazy. So I'll be ready for that. It's going to be pretty insane, pretty wild. Usually it's pretty wild when he speaks. I just want to note that he's going to be speaking in Washington, D.C., and he's going to be giving us more clarity about how the central banks plan on proceeding with monetary policy. I think most of what he's going to say is going to be like the same old script about how he's going to wait and see what the data tells us, but he could give some Easter eggs, some little hints here and there about what the Fed could end up doing in March. Sometimes that could happen. This could shake the markets, so please be prepared for this and make sure you're ready. On top of this, he's also talking about how he's going to provide a sharp review about the markets and what the Fed's mandate has to be. We're going to learn more about the employment data, how the Fed is going to react to that, and lots of things like that. So watch for this very carefully at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Jerome Powell will be opening his mouth, and it's going to cause some major volatility. On top of this, we also have at 2 o'clock p.m., so after Jerome Powell is gone, after all this stuff is out, we have the Fed beige book coming out, and this is going to be the summary of commentary on the current economic conditions. This is very important. So this data is also going to come out. It's going to be like a book about the current state of the economy, what's happening with employment data, different sectors, services, and all this information that could be used by the markets may cause the market to move to some extent starting at 2 p.m. tomorrow if you're interested in that. Besides that, we have some earnings that just came out. So today, before the market opened, we had NIO and Target announced their earnings. NIO ended up getting a bounce. Target also held up nicely. But then we had CrowdStrike, ChargePoint, and Ross just announced their earnings just a couple of minutes ago. Going into tomorrow, we have Foot Locker, Campbell's, JD, and just a couple of others. That's going to be worth watching, worth listening to. But for now, let's just talk about these ones that just came out, just these top three. So for CrowdStrike, it's actually doing very, very well. They beat on EPS, they beat on revenue, and guidance was very, very strong for the upcoming year and for the upcoming quarter. That's actually some great news for them. That's why the share prices are up 21% for them. That's great, great, great news. On top of this, they have another reiterated goal of $10 billion for their revenue for 2030. That's still very strong, good fundamentals, good for them. Now, for ChargePoint, on the other hand, their fourth quarter revenue is about $116 million. Not as strong. Their gross margins are about 19%, but their adjusted gross margins are actually down to about 6%. And that's actually not as great for them. Their overall guidance was not as strong for the year, not to mention the next quarter. So this wasn't as great for them. We actually saw the share price sink because of this. Their overall guidance was not as great as what we were expecting. So that's what ends up happening. For Ross, they had very mixed earnings, in my opinion. The share price is just barely down, but it's not really much. With earnings coming out, EPS was pretty good. We actually saw some nice growth overall quarter over quarter. EPS was decent. Their revenue was just okay the last time we saw this, and then we'll just have to see how it goes for them. With that being said, though, with EPS and revenue looking decent for Ross, I just want to note that their guidance overall was just like kind of mixed. Not as strong as what some of these analysts were expecting, but not too weak either. So not bad from Ross, very mixed earnings. That's why the share price is kind of flat. Anyways, with that's done, I just want to focus on the charts and break down how things are looking. So as you guys could tell, SPY has been downtrending and it's looking a little bit weak right now. We're barely holding our 50 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. If we lose this, I could see this thing dropping. So it all depends on Jerome Powell. The guy's going to be opening his mouth in the morning. There is a risk of this dropping more, though we barely got much of a bounce. I think that it might kind of like pop and drop going into Jerome Powell's speech. And then when he starts speaking, we're just going to see this thing go all over the place. If we get a clean break below 505, so we might pop and drop first thing in the morning. Don't forget that approaching his speech. But then after his speech starts, I can't really predict that as well, guys. I'm sorry about that. It really depends on what he says. So look for a little pop and drop. We could retest like 508 plus, a little bit above that, then come back down to 506. And then when he starts speaking, right, if he causes a rug pull, if we lose 505, watch us come all the way down to 502. If Jerome Powell speaks and the market gets a big bounce, we could be making our way back up to like 511 plus. That's a real possibility. We'll just have to wait and see. So I'll be watching for that very carefully. Here are the levels specifically. You guys can see the chart right here. So look for a little pop and drop tomorrow. Then Jerome Powell starts his little speech and his testimony. If it causes the market to launch, we could be breaking past 510 to 511. If he causes a rug pull and we lose 505, 502 is coming next. So watch for that very, very carefully. I'll have to see in real time before I make any more claims. As far as Tesla goes, Tesla's showing some life in the after hours. We could be looking for a push to 182.5 tomorrow. If we break this, 184 is coming, but then we might come back down once Jerome Powell starts speaking. He's about to start speaking, right? And then during his speech, if the guy causes a big rug pull, Tesla could come all the way back down to 178 or even below that. If the guy gives us a big bounce, we could see Tesla start pushing back above 184 and start pushing to fill this gap up here. We could actually come all the way up to like 188 all over again. But once again, it depends on Jerome Powell. What does this guy cause? Approaching his speech, we might pop a little bit on Tesla, retest 184, then come back down. And once his mouth opens, there's no telling what's going to happen. So just be very careful. The QQQ, okay, QQQ is trying to rebound a little bit. We could actually retest 438 in my opinion. If we break past this, I could see us pushing a little bit more towards like 438.8. But then the question is, what is Jerome Powell going to say? When Jerome Powell opens his mouth, whether he is hawkish or not, we'll just have to wait and see. But he could cause this thing to launch even more. If we do launch higher, I'll be watching this 441 area. We have an imbalance up here. If he causes a rug pull, we could come back down to 434, even 433.5. In my opinion, it depends on him. Look for a little push tomorrow when we open. We might push up nicely, push a little higher, get close to 438. If we break that, we could get closer to like 440 is also a possibility that we come back down. And then when Jerome Powell starts his speech, we could launch towards 441. If that breaks, the gap all the way up here to 443 could get filled. If not, if Powell gives us the rug pull, we could come back down. Look for a pop and drop approaching his speech, and then we'll see what happens after that. Here's Nvidia's chart next. Nvidia, this is looking pretty interesting. It's trying to push right now. It might get a retest of about 866. And if we break this, I could see 872 again. But then we might reject, come back down when Jerome Powell starts his speech. Sometimes that happens. We come right back down. We might retest like 853, then come back up, trading sideways all over the place. And then when Jerome Powell is speaking, who knows what's going to happen? If he launches the markets, Nvidia could break its all-time high and push to 880 plus. If he gives us the rug pull, we could be right back down to 834, even below that. After that, it all depends on him. So I think we're going to pop when we open, come back down when Powell starts his speech, and then we'll see what happens after that. Do we launch up or do we come back down? We'll just wait and see. This is forming kind of like an inverse head and shoulders like structure as well. So there's a chance it just tries to push up higher. It could push a little bit, come back down, and then Jerome Powell will determine if this thing keeps going. So watch for that very carefully. Apple, not looking too strong, but but this is trying to hold 170 very nicely. This has a chance to bounce, a very, very good chance. We have to take this chance. So going into tomorrow, it might try to push for 171. If we do so, it might come down a little bit, and then Jerome Powell opening his mouth could cause Apple to bounce to 172.5, or he could give us a big rug pull, and this thing could just start sinking back down towards 168. But I do think it's going to pop, and it has a chance to get a big bounce. If Apple bounces and pushes back up to 172 or even fills this gap, we have a big gap to fill at 174. If we get the bounce, if Jerome Powell gives us that boost, the market is going to bounce, guys. Apple could drag the market up, so could Nvidia. These stocks are powerful. So make sure you're prepared for this. Make sure you're ready. I want to give you guys a warning about that. All right. So the current chart on SPY is looking a little bit weak, by the way. We're looking kind of weak. The market does look kind of weak, but there is potential to bounce. We might kind of like push when we open. And then when Jerome Powell's about to give a speech, we might slow down. But then after Powell is done, or once he opens his mouth, then we're going to see some crazy volatility. If Jerome Powell says something that causes the whole market to push upwards, the whole market's going to bounce, especially if we're led by big tech, like stocks like Apple, stocks like Nvidia, stocks like Microsoft. Jerome Powell is a massive catalyst. Some people call him the biggest market maker. It's going to be massive. It's going to be wild. So get ready for tomorrow. Anyways, for Rivian, okay? Rivian is still very flat. It might retest 11, come back down, just continue to trade sideways. If we break past 1107 tomorrow, it could actually bounce and push up towards 11.4. There's a possibility of us getting a bounce, but we need Jerome Powell to help us. We need Jerome Powell to give us that confirmation, that support. Now, SoFi has been sinking, but please know that we're approaching critical support. 7.25 is one support, followed by 7 flat. So we'll have to watch and see if we can get a bounce at one of those levels. I do think it's looking bearish right now. There's a risk of it getting very close to 7 before we see any kind of bounce. So it might actually sink a little bit before we get that bounce at 7. So watch for that very carefully. ARM started off very weak, but now it's trying to bounce because we grabbed liquidity right over here. If we're bullish, you want to see it retest 137.8 and break that. If that breaks, 140 is coming. If we're bearish, you want to see it basically lose 134. If that fails us, 132 is coming. There's a slight downtrend right here on ARM, but we'll see if we can get that bounce. So watch for that very carefully. Jerome Powell, don't forget Jerome Powell's another big factor. We'll see what he causes for ARM. For Supermicro, it's showing some love. It started very weak. It came down as we predicted, but then it started to bounce, and it might be retesting its all-time high again. It's still bullish. The chart is still bullish. Got a nice bounce off our 20 EMA. So if we break 1,100, watch 1,155, then I'd watch 1,200 and 1,250 from there. There is potential for this to push higher, but Jerome Powell is going to determine if this thing will go much higher or not. It might push tomorrow towards 1,100. 1,150, and then we'll see if we reject or not. But it does look like it's going to try to bounce a little bit. Jerome Powell will determine if the bounce continues or not, nonetheless. For Palantir, this did come down as you predicted. It didn't actually reach our targets, but it came close. But now we're going to be watching 24 and 24.17. If those break, 25 is coming. So we'll see if Jerome Powell helps us or not. It is looking like it's trying to base, so watch for that very carefully. Russell 2000, this is looking bearish. It was looking bearish, but we still have this support at 202.9. So it might come down a little bit, could retest 202.9-ish, and then try to bounce off that. So there could be a little bit more downside coming before I see some sort of bounce. So watch for this very carefully. If we get a bigger bounce, Jerome Powell is going to be the cause of that. So wait and see what he has to say. We have a gap to fill as well. I could see this dropping a little bit more than trying to bounce. So wait for that. Microsoft. This thing took a big hit after some bad news came out. But exactly as we predicted, I said this in my intraday video, watch the 200 EMA, 400.8. It actually bounced off 400.6, so very close. And you can see it's trying to hold the 200 EMA, so it's at support. The last time we came close to the 200 EMA, we got a big bounce. So we're going to see if Microsoft gets a big bounce or not. So in my opinion, as long as the data is decent tomorrow, as long as Jerome Powell does not cause the market to crash, this thing will most likely make its way back up to 409. If Jerome Powell gives us the rug pull, we could sink all the way down to 397, even 395. But it's looking from a technical standpoint like it wants to bounce. That's what Microsoft looks like to me. Just to be safe, we'll see what happens. AMD, in my opinion, is kind of flat. It came down a little bit. It's starting to bounce a bit. We're about to get a bullish PPO crossover, so it looks kind of bullish to me. It may retest 211. We might push for 211 tomorrow, 210 to 211, come back down, and then Jerome Powell will determine if we get a rug pulled back down to 198 or if we get a continuation up to 215. For a few more, we have the VIX. The VIX, in my opinion, is, it pushed to 15, got a big rejection. We're going to be watching to see if this thing turns back down, if the market gets some kind of bounce. So I'll be watching for this on the VIX. Will Jerome Powell cause this thing to drop back down to fill its gap in the 13s, eventually sink lower? Or is this thing about to just come down a bit, then continue to push higher, get a big spike because of Powell? Either of those possibilities are probable. I do find that this rejection right here is a big red flag, so it might end up coming down thanks to Powell. But just to be safe, we'll wait and see. The dollar came down with the market, but do not forget that it's still holding support. So it's very flat right now, not really doing anything. It's been going back and forth for many, many days now. So there's not much on this chart. I'd rather wait and see what happens instead of speculating. For Coinbase, we came down just a little bit. We're at support at 216. We might try to push a little bit towards 220, come back down to 216. Then Jerome Powell is going to determine if we get a rug pull back down to this gap down here to fill at 206. Do we come down to 206, or do we see a big bounce after his speech to push back up towards 235? So watch this carefully. We'll be watching that very, very soon. For Google's attempting to bounce on the 4-hour, but we need more confirmation. If Jerome Powell helps this, I think tomorrow it's going to push up towards 136, then reject. And then what's going to happen is it kind of like pops and then drops. Then Jerome Powell will determine if we get a bigger push for 138 or if we come back down to 130. So look for a little push tomorrow morning. We come back down a little bit. Then Jerome Powell's speech will start at 10 a.m. and we'll see if he gives us a big push or not. But I am giving you guys some information about the morning. For Amazon, it's trying to fight about around the 50 EMA. Still looking kind of weak, though. There's a weak downtrend. There's a risk of it coming lower. If we kind of like pop, to me, it still looks kind of bearish. We're still below our 50 EMA. I'm going to be watching this test tomorrow. Watch 174.35. If we break past this, 175.79 is coming. But we called this downside move. We called 174 yesterday. Remember that, guys? If we reject here and we lose 173, I could see 171. So please be careful. Amazon still looks kind of weak. For this thing to return, we have to break above 176. Okay, and Jerome Powell is going to determine that, so I'll be waiting for that. But this is like still kind of indecisive. Meta looks like it's kind of stuck now between two supports and resistance levels. Basically, tomorrow, I think that we're going to be testing 493, then coming back down. And then Jerome Powell will determine, do we break this green line? Do we break above 493 and push back up to 495 plus? Or do we lose the yellow line? Do we lose 487 and start sinking back down to 485 or below that? Jerome Powell will be the cause of that. We'll see which way it breaks. So be prepared for this and get ready. With that being said, guys, tomorrow is going to be a very exciting day. We have two big pieces of two time frames in which you should be watching for data. Once again, tomorrow at 10 a.m., Jerome Powell is giving a speech 30 minutes after the market opens. And then at 2 o'clock p.m., we have the beige book. I'll talk more about that later. So get ready for all this data. Get ready for Jerome Powell. This guy, when he opens his mouth, the whole market shakes. So be prepared for this. We'll see what he ends up saying. He could cause the whole market to get a big rug pull, or he could cause the whole market to rally very hard. My general view is that the market may get a little pop when we open, push a little bit, and then come back down. And once he's about to start his speech, and then once he's like speaking, who knows what he's going to cause? I really don't know, guys. I wish I was a fortune teller. I wish I knew what he was going to say, but I don't truly know. So the best thing to do as a trader is be responsible, step back a little bit, wait and see, and then you could even just scalp intraday. But honestly, not financial advice. You guys do you. I'll talk more about Powell tomorrow. All right, so I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Take care, do what you have to do, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. The market to the moon, and peace out.